Speaker, the Gettysburg Address is 286 words. The Declaration of Independence, 1,322 words. And government regulations on the sale of cabbage is 27,000 words, Mr. Speaker. Now, that's not enough to stuff your cabbage roll. Regulations cost taxpayers $400 billion a year, $4,000 for every family, each and every year, year in and year out. Unbelievable. It's so bad. If a dog urinates in a parking lot, the EPA declares it a wetland. Beam me up, Mr. Speaker. I yield back 2,800,000 words in our tax code.
That was Democratic Ohio Congressman James Trafficant, an October 12, 1999 floor speech, ending with his signature line, "Beam me up, Mr. Speaker." At some point, close listeners to this podcast might have wondered, why have we never done a Best of James Trafficant episode? Well, wonder no more, because this is it. But why now? Well, two reasons. One, this podcast is running on May 8th. That's right, James Trafficant's birthday. He was born on May 8th, 1941, but we don't have to tell you folks that. And two, we have a very special guest for this podcast. We're joined by one of America's foremost James Trafficant observers. He's the editor-at-large of Reason Magazine, Nick Gillespie. In this episode of C-SPAN's podcast Weekly, we mark what would have been James Trafficant's 84th birthday by playing best-of clips from his House floor speeches, spanning his 15 and a half years as a congressman. Then we'll hear Nick Gillespie react to each of them. Which James Trafficant clips will you hear? They all have one thing in common. They all include his iconic catchphrase, "Beam me up." Everything that follows is unrehearsed and unscripted, just raw James Trafficant giving speeches and raw Nick Gillespie responding with expert analysis. But before we hear from James Trafficant, let's hear from Nick Gillespie. All right, Nick Gillespie, who was James Trafficant?
James Trafficant was a congressman from Ohio, from the Youngstown area, who was a 9-term congressman who ended up going to federal prison for all kinds of bad behavior, including strong-arming his staffers and various constituents into giving kickbacks. He was involved with the mob in that part of the country, and he's a fascinating prototype of exactly the kind of Rust Belt populist, difficult to categorize politics that are coming out of a different part of Ohio now when you think about people like J.D. Vance. Trafficant was a ridiculous figure. He had been a football hero at the University of Pittsburgh, and then he showed up in Congress after being a county sheriff, where he was investigated by the FBI for taking mob money. He wore a toupee and was given to extreme, paranoid, culture war-drenched, crazy populist politics that just happened to be the dominant, kind of motif in today's politics. He used the term, "I think America comes first," back in the 90s. If we go back and look at James Trafficant now, we kind of see the present and a possible future for America.
Okay, so you threw a lot of different concepts in there of why we still are interested in him and why we are still attracted to the James Trafficant story. Why is Nick Gillespie still interested in James Trafficant?
For two reasons. One is sheer kind of entertainment value. When you see the way that he acts, it's not quite a vanishing breed, but it is part and parcel of a long tradition of kind of nutty people who get elected to high office in America. Again, I think if you see in him, in embryonic form, a version of Donald Trump, really, from different ways. But then the other thing that I think is really important to think about is that he crosses all kinds of party lines. So he was a big government Democrat, but he was extremely anti-abortion. He denounced the raid on the Waco compound that killed the Branch Davidians with incredible fervor. He was very anti-immigrant, but he was very in favor of helping the people in his region. He ultimately said that he had been targeted for what he got put in federal prison for by the state of Israel and AIPAC. So, he had the politics of paranoia, of conspiracy, and of populism that is, just always a strain in America, but is going through a resurgence. And he's kind of the source material for a lot of this.
So, source material, Nick Gillespie, you are the first one. Many people have said to me and to do a podcast on the best of James Traficant. You took the initiative of proposing a specific one. We'll hear some clips in a moment. What drew you to go that further step of saying, I don't want to just hear a couple moments from James Traficant. I actually want to do a whole podcast related to him. Why did you take that extra step forward in this?
Well, again, this goes to how he kind of is predictive of where we're at now. He took great advantage of the special order speeches in Congress that Newt Gingrich had kind of pioneered as a force of political change and political rhetoric. And he took the opportunity. He used again and again the Star Trek derived misquote, "Beam me up," which is the idea is it's a slogan of "There's no signs of intelligent life, on this planet. Beam me up, Scotty." But the topics that he chose to get outraged over and the way he tried to foreground those as politics, again, is both fascinating and incredibly relevant.
What does, and we'll play the clips in a moment, and each of these clips we play do end with the catchphrase, "Beam me up." You said that's a misquote. What's the correct?
Yeah, there's if you Google around, or ChatGPT this, you'll find, from the original series of Star Trek, there is a persistent misquote, kind of like the way that "Play It Again, Sam," does not actually appear in Casablanca, or Cary Grant never said "Judy, Judy, Judy." That this was something that, Captain Kirk, William Shatner on the original series of Star Trek used to say all the time. And it is a kind of howl of righteous indignation, which kind of also admits to how ridiculous it is and what a strange and bizarre world we live in. And that kind of encapsulates, both who Jim Trafficant was and what we might learn from him.
So, Nick, from your vantage point at Reason Foundation, Reason Magazine, and you see a weird world we live in, do you have your own catchphrase that you use on the job?
God, I wish I did. I'm afraid I don't. Okay. I grew up in the 70s, so I was surrounded by catchphrases, whether it's from Welcome Back, Kotter, or Good Times, or, All in the Family. But I want to live in a world past catchphrases, Howard. Maybe if our politics were less about catchphrases and more about, thoughtful deliberation about what's best for the country and for the individuals who live here, we would be we'd be in a better place.
Well, there you go. All right. Now, Nick Gillespie, on to the clips. Many of these clips you've already singled out 15 years ago in a Reason magazine article titled "Starfleet Commander Traficant. He's Not Really Dead as Long as We Remember Him." That piece came out in 2010, and as you mentioned, Nick, in 2014, James Trafficant was dead. And, of course, he died when a tractor fell on top of him. So
yeah, and this is a darkly funny quote that appeared in the Weekly Standard, the old magazine that the neoconservative magazine started by William Crystal. That doesn't exist anymore. But Matt Labash, who was one of their best contributors when Trafficant died, he noted the circumstances of his death and then said, Trafficant died as he lived, being crushed by the weight of the machine.
Okay, we are now going to go to our first clip from the House floor, James Trafficant, 1-minute speech on October 11th, 2000.
The United States Army in Europe has denied Catholic soldiers the right to hold Mass in the base chapel. A spokesman said, and I quote, "The Army will not pay for the cost of a priest." He further said, and I quote, "If we allow the Catholics in, we must allow all religions in." Now, that's not enough to shred the Bible. The Army does allow and permits witchcraft and pagan ceremonies at the base. The spokesman said now, and I quote, "The witchcraft groups pay for their own pagan ministers. Unbelievable. It's time to call in the dogs, throw the coffee grinds on the fire. The hunting's over. When the U.S. Army allows Satan in one door and will not allow God in the other door, America is so screwed up, we don't know where we're going. Beam me up here. I yield back the fact that an America without God is an America that the founders never planned.
Okay, Nick Gillespie, your reaction.
The one thing I'll signal in that or point out is that, Traficant was a populist. We're going through a populist moment. There was a time in America up through, before World War II, where being a populist meant being explicitly anti-Catholic. The populist movements of the 19th and early 20th century disliked Catholics because they tended to be immigrants. So it's kind of a fascinating moment that Traficant, who was part Italian and part Hungarian, has gotten to a point now where, in order to espouse his or, really foreground his populist bona fides, he is talking about, Catholics being attacked. It's an interesting progression.
Great. Okay. Our next clip, May 17th, 2000, House floor speech. Again, we'll be hearing from Democratic Ohio Congressman James Traficant.
Speaker, who's lying about Waco? Scientist Carl Gigliotti said the FBI lied, that they did fire automatic weapons into the burning building. But Vector Data Systems of England said the FBI did not lie. Two scientific groups totally disagree. But something stinks. Vector gets hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts from the FBI. Carl Gigliotti was just found dead. To boot, FBI audio tapes of the burning building are now lost. To boot, FBI autopsy reports confiscated of victims are now missing. Beam me up, Mr. Speaker. This isn't a Justice Department. This is a cover-up. We need an investigation.
Nick Gillespie. Yeah, the raid on Waco, which was one of the very first things that Attorney General Janet Reno did upon becoming Bill Clinton's Attorney General, was incredibly controversial, and it kind of laid out a major theme that is still alive with us today, which is that the FBI and things like the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which had initiated the standoff, they are, brutally corrupt. They are a cause of crime rather than, protection from same and things like that. So, I think it's worth thinking about the paranoia and the conspiracy thinking here. And there's a lot to answer for. The government has not answered properly for its actions in Waco. There's a very good Oscar-nominated documentary called Waco Rules of Engagement that sifts through all of this. But beyond anything else, it also shows how Jim Trafficant, a Democrat, was attacking his own party's administration and its actions in something as controversial to that. You start to see the breakdown of the parties as kind of unified opposition to one another. And I think Trafficant's worth thinking about as a forerunner of what is to come.
Okay, we move now to Flag Day from June 1999.
Madam Speaker, in America, it's illegal to burn trash, but you can burn the flag. It's illegal to remove a label from a mattress, but you can literally rip the stars and stripes off our flag. It's illegal to damage a mailbox, but you can destroy our flag. Beam me up. A people that does not honor and respect their flag is a people that does not honor and respect their country nor their neighbors. Today is Flag Day. I say, if you want to make a political statement, burn your bra, burn your BVDs, but leave Old Glory alone. Every day should be Flag Day.
And you hear the applause. Nick, before I get your reaction to that specifically, note that he did talk about clothes that people wear, and he was known for his own flamboyant style of dress as well. So,
he dressed kind of like an outdoor couch looks. And I also want to point out he was saying burn our BVDs, which is an old form of men's underwear, of long johns, so people don't think it's DVDs. But this is pure populism. It's symbolic activity that he is getting so uptight about. And as you heard from the applause, which is rare for his special order speeches, partly because the chamber is usually completely empty. But this was and remains a very popular position, something that Donald Trump still routinely brings up in his rallies.
Okay, moving to October 5th, 2000, and I will preface this only by saying, before we play the clip, this clip from October 5th, 2000, in the Congressional Record, the clip is titled, the 1-minute speech is titled, "The Vagina Monologues." And now we'll play the clip and you'll see why I indicate that.
Broadway has announced a new play called Vaginal Monologues. I quote, "The promo states that Vaginal Monologues uses humor and drama to explore such things as sexual fantasies, orgasms, pelvic examinations, and rape." Now, if that's not enough to entice your condominium, this vaginal virtuoso is being billed as theater at its finest. Unbelievable. What's next? Rectal diaries? Men are dropping like flies in America from prostate cancer, and Broadway is promoting vaginal titillation. Beam me up. I advise all New York men to sleep on their stomach, and I yield back all the STDs on the East Coast.
Okay, in the prior clip, he talked BVDs. Now he's talking STDs. Nick Gillespie, your reaction to that one?
This is a masterpiece, and we should appreciate everything, starting with the fact that he is misquoting the play that he is denouncing. It's a beautiful capsule summary of the politics of outrage and of persecution. How can we be talking about vaginas when men are dying from prostate cancer? This is a capsule summary of how you get to culture war issues becoming front and center in American politics. It's almost as if we don't have anything meaningful to discuss anymore, or the things that are meaningful to discuss, like the debt and deficits, are so great that we would rather talk about things that don't matter. But this is not just classic Traficant; it's classic populism. And, there's a short line from this to the way that people like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump present themselves.
And by the way, you mentioned J.D. Vance. I think we talked about this earlier, that J.D. Vance, obviously from Ohio, roughly the same, elected by the same population that James Traficant was in Youngstown.
Yeah, Traficant is, he's from from Rivertown area, a little bit further east and north from Middletown, Ohio, where J.D. Vance was from. But this is Rust Belt America, and that is very important to help explain why people tend to be anti-immigrant, they tend to be anti-elites, and they feel like their world has been robbed from them. And so there's a lot of projection of dark, shadowy forces that are destroying them without caring about it.
Nick, you're from that area, right? You grew up there? Or?
I'm not from there. I was born in New York and grew up in New Jersey, but I lived in Oxford, Ohio, which is a college town not far from Middletown, Ohio, where Vance grew up. I lived there full and part-time for about 20 years, and I have relatives and whatnot in Ohio. I also went to grad school in Buffalo. I know the post-industrial Midwest quite well. And, and I don't say this in any kind of haughty way or anything. It's very important to understand the sense of helplessness that often pervades parts of Western Pennsylvania, upstate New York, Ohio, Indiana, and whatnot, where it is a false narrative, and it's part of the problem that people insist on it being true, but But the idea that up until yesterday, we all had these incredibly fabulous, well-paying industrial jobs, factory jobs where, the men could work, 40 hours a week and, pay for 3 families and have money left over and go on vacation. And then suddenly that got ripped away from us. The actual story is much more complicated, and the future is much more complicated. But that sense of having your future stolen from you is very palpable in this region. And understanding that and empathizing with it, I think, is the beginning of actually coming up with the types of policies that will help people in those regions to bounce back more than they have. And in fact, they have in many ways already.
Our next clip from June 5th, 2001, again, a House floor speech by Democratic Congressman from Ohio, James Trafficant.
A high school in Washington has crowned America's first female prom king. No joke. Now, I don't care what anyone's sexual preference is, but enough is enough. What's next? Beauty pageants for cross-dressers? Think about it. America has guns, drugs, rape, and even murder in school, and now a lesbian is a prom king. If that's not enough to titillate J. Edgar Hoover, prayer and God are still not allowed in America's schools. Beam me up, ladies and gentlemen. A nation that allows lesbians to be prom kings in our schools, but denies the Lord access to our schools, is a nation headed for stone-cold disaster. I yield back one ray of hope. There's a new policy at Ferndale High School. All future prom kings shall be male.
Nick Gillespie.
I have a background in literary studies, and if you look at these texts like high modernist, lyric poems, there's just so much to look at. I mean, it's fantastic. But two things that stand out. One is that it's kind of incredible and wonderful that he says, "I don't care what anyone's sexual preference is." So he's conceding that he lives in a modern world where men aren't always men and women aren't always women, and he's kind of like okay with it, but don't parade it in my face. And then the other thing that is fascinating to me is that he throws J. Edgar Hoover under the bus. I mean, he is suggesting, that J. Edgar Hoover is a cross-dresser, which is an unfounded, rumor that only cropped up after Hoover had died. But this is where populism gets very interesting, where typically you think people who are proud Americans, they love, mom and apple pie and the American flag, and J. Edgar Hoover, a great American. But in fact, when you're in this type of populism, J. Edgar Hoover is part of the problem. And he is suspect in the same way that he suspected, that homosexuals were, communists by definition and things like that. It's quite a fascinating kind of performance here.
Okay, our next clip is from July 17th, 2001. And I will note parenthetically that every other clip we've been playing is from a 1-minute floor speech where at the beginning of each House day session. What the clip we're playing now is also 1 minute, but it's not a floor speech. It's not a early morning floor speech. It actually came during the debate when he was recognized during floor debate from July 17th, 2001.
The Old Glory Condom Corporation lost the decision. They weren't allowed to sell their red, white, and blue condoms, so they appealed. They said their red, white, and blue condoms were a patriotic symbol, and you guessed it, the U.S. Trademark Office of Appeals agreed. Panel said the Old Glory condom is not unconstitutional. You can wear it. That's not enough to constipate our veterans. 2 men from Columbus, Ohio, were recently charged with burning a gay pride flag during a parade. Now think about it. It's illegal to burn leaves and trash in America. It's illegal to damage a mailbox. Now it's illegal to burn a gay pride flag. And it's completely legal and patriotic to wear a red, white, and blue condom. Beam me up, ladies and gentlemen. I think if American citizens want to make a political statement, they should burn their brassiere, burn their boxer shorts, but leave Old Glory alone, period.
Nick Gillespie, another mention of underwear in that speech.
Yeah, now and sexual perversion. This is when people think their world is breaking down, oftentimes they feel like they are, somehow stuck in the middle of a sexual house of horrors. And you can see this, a kind of paranoid delusion everywhere that Jim Trafficant looks. He's holding on to his toupee lest it just blow off his head in a steam pile coming out of his, from between his ears. There is sexual perversion everywhere, and the sexual perverts get, they have rights that he has been stripped of, he and decent Americans. It is, it's a powerful sense of wounded outrage at a world that no longer cares about you.
Okay, I'm going to play one more. This is not our final clip, but one more in the theme of burning stuff. And this is it's from June 12th, 1997, the floor speech. And this kind of a best of clip. This brings in a lot of the themes, Nick Gillespie, that you have talked about and that we've heard in other speeches. So here we go. Congressman James Traficant, June 12th, 1997.
In America, it's illegal to remove a label from a mattress, but you can rip the stars and stripes from the flag. In America, it's illegal to damage a mailbox, but you can destroy the flag. And scholars say the Constitution allows it. Maybe so, but the original Constitution allowed slavery and treated women and Indians like cattle. Mr. Speaker, it's time to change the Constitution. A people that do not honor and respect their flag is a people that does not honor and respect neither their neighbors nor their country. If you want to make a political statement, burn your bra, burn your pantyhose, burn your BVDs, but leave Old Glory alone. It's time to amend the Constitution.
Nick, before I get your reaction, when he talks at the end about amending the Constitution, you as a libertarian would not support that or would support amending the Constitution for this?
Well, I mean, the amendment process is part of the Constitution. So, I have no problem with constitutional amendments, not as a process. It depends on whether they're good. The Prohibition amendment was a bad amendment, but it was good that it was repealed. I think one of the things that is really genuinely fascinating here, and I think it speaks directly to the energy on the populist right, where you get somebody who literally or figuratively is wrapping himself in the flag as a sacred icon, an item that, is like the Eucharist in a Catholic service. It can't touch the ground. It can't be besmirched. So, yet he's criticizing the Constitution and saying it must be amended. There's a lot of burning things down in this speech in the name of preserving what is historically great about America, which then is partly problematic because, the original Constitution didn't treat Indians and women right. That dynamic, I think, speaks to a lot of what you see coming out of the Trump White House and more broadly the populist right, a kind of Steve Bannon type right, where they are the true patriots, and so they are going to destroy the country that they love so much in order to save the country they love so much and remake it in the way that it is supposed to be, maybe always was, but then maybe wasn't. It's an interesting kind of loop that generates a lot of friction and a lot of sparks.
Okay, Nick Gillespie, our final clip that we're going to play and get your reaction to is from November 3rd, 1999, and I will preface it by giving the title that's in the congressional record, and the title is gentle enough and anodyne enough. The title in the congressional record of this floor speech is "The Lady Buckeyes at the Lincoln Memorial," and here's what James Trafficant ended up talking about.
The Ohio State women's rugby team, Mr. Speaker, wanted to do something memorable in D.C. It was memorable, all right. Unlike Brandy Chastain's highly publicized sports bra expose, the Lady Buckeyes went topless. That's right, topless. The Lincoln Memorial became a strip joint. Bras were flying everywhere. Unbelievable. Now, after all this, the university has suspended the team, and these Buckeye vixens are awaiting the final decision. Beam me up, Mr. Speaker. Leave these foxy ladies alone. If America can forgive the president, Ohio State University can forgive these Buckeye divas. I yield back all of the memorable excitement at the Lincoln Memorial.
Nick Gillespie, take it away.
This is kind of amazing, right? Where he is disturbed by flagrant displays of sexuality, particularly alternative sexuality. But here, maybe because it was the Ohio State women's rugby team and he's from Ohio, but he's like, if Bill Clinton can stay in office, because that's the backdrop for this, after being exposed as having many sexual escapades in the White House, shouldn't we be more forgiving, should the Ohio State University president and the NCAA should be. I see this as a kind of hopeful note because he seems to be able to kind of move into a world that is more forgiving and less Manichaean. I will add, just as a final point, there's a fantastic Fox News interview that then Fox News host Greta Van Susteren did with Traficant in 2009, where he absolutely says, so this is after he's been released from federal prison where he'd served multiple years on his conviction, and he says bluntly that he was put away by dark, shadowy forces that include AIPAC and the State of Israel, as well as their minions in the American government. It is paranoid, delusional, and deeply disturbing, because I think even at these moments, such as we just heard, where Traficant wants to be, forgiving and kind and generous and moving into the future, his politics of paranoia, his resentment, his fixation on cultural decline, it ends up in a place that is not a very good place for an individual to be or for a country to be. So, again, in this sense, I think Traficant, in being populist, and of being foreground in culture war issues, and of fixating on cultural decline and economic decline, and the need to fight back in order to change that in the name of the common man. And the common man can't be from another country. The common man can't be gay. The common man can't be alternative. He's sending us a message from the past that I think we would do well to kind of understand and grapple with in a serious way, even if he himself is a tragically comic figure.
Nick Gillespie, final question for you as we wrap up. Will you remain on the James Trafficant hunt? Will you constantly remain vigilant in the memory and bringing his politics of 20, 30 years ago back into the present?
Yeah, I think so. Our history is bizarre and strange and wonderful, and also, covered in shadows. And I think somebody like Jim Trafficant is, if you forget about people like him, they are going to come back in a more forceful way. And again, I want to stress that one of the reasons, and I am not pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I voted for the Libertarian Party candidate, as I tend to do, and things like that. And there is a populism on the left which traffics in very many similar things, historically as well as in current days. Conspiracies and theories that America is being overtaken from without or by elites and things like that. This is a major, major impulse throughout American history. And I think it is important to understand when people tell you that they feel left out, that they are hurting, that they do not understand the world and they can't cope with it or they don't want to cope with it. It's important to hear them out and to understand what's going on, and then to figure out what are ways in which we make it possible for more people in America to participate fully in the making of the country, but also of their individual lives. And I think, the way that many liberals in particular dismissed Donald Trump in 2016 and again in 2024, that's a big mistake. It doesn't mean that everything that they say needs to be, kind of taken as true. That's certainly not true. I mean, we're right now, America, I think, is searching for a new national narrative, one that will allow us to move into the future in an inclusive way and in an economically viable way. And we haven't figured that out yet. And listening to the complaints of people who are the literal and figurative, descendants of Jim Trafficant is a very important place to start with that.
Concluding thought, Nick, has nothing to do with James Trafficant, has everything to do with Nick Gillespie. You have been a constant presence on the C-SPAN networks for years on our morning call-in program and in our book programming and other different venues. If people can't get enough Nick Gillespie content, where can people go to hear you and to read you? And let's put some plugs in for people finding Nick Gillespie.
Yeah, I mean, the best place is at the Reason magazine website. We are a libertarian politics and culture magazine that's been around since 1968. I've worked there since 1993. Our subtitle is Free Minds and Free Markets. We believe that, capitalism is good, and so is cultural innovation and, letting people live the lives that they want to live to the greatest degree possible. But if you go to Reason.com, and plug my name in, you'll get decades worth of chatter. I'm also too present on Twitter, and my handle there is Nick Gillespie, all one word. It's just my name, and those are the places to find me and the work that I do.
Nick Gillespie, thank you very, very much for joining us here on C-SPAN's podcast, The Weekly.
Thanks so much.